The day of the will reading was the day everything changed. My father, Richard Taylor, founder of Taylor Technologies, a company worth over $200 million, had just passed away after a brief but devastating battle with pancreatic cancer. The boardroom was silent as Mr. Harrington, my father's attorney for over 30 years, adjusted his glasses and began reading the document that would determine all our futures. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. And to my son, Alexander Taylor, I leave. Mr. Harrington paused, looking up from the paper with a hint of surprise in his eyes. I leave my collection of vintage watches and the sum of $1 million. $1 million. Out of a $200 million empire. The company I had dedicated the last 12 years of my life to. The company that bore my family name. And to my stepson, Bradley Wilson, I leave the controlling interest in Taylor Technologies, amounting to 51% of company shares, the position of Chief Executive Officer, and my estate in Greenwich. The room spun around me as I watched my stepbrother's shocked expression transform into a smug smile. Brad had been my father's stepson for all of 6 years. 6 years versus my lifetime of dedication. What nobody in that room knew, not Brad, not Mr. Harrington, not even my father before he died, was that I had been keeping something hidden. Something that would change everything. And now, it was time to reveal it. My name is Alexander Taylor, and until 3 months ago, I was the Executive Vice President of Operations at Taylor Technologies. My father founded the company 35 years ago, building it from a small software development startup operating out of our garage into one of the leading cybersecurity firms in the country. I quite literally grew up in that company, doing homework in empty conference rooms after school, interning during college breaks, and finally joining full-time after graduating with my MBA from Stanford. The company was my birthright, or so I thought. My mother died when I was 16. Car accident, drunk driver. Those years were tough on both of us, but Dad and I became closer than ever. We had each other, and we had company. For almost a decade, it was just the two of us. Then, at a charity gala 6 years ago, my father met Vanessa Wilson. She was beautiful, charming, and 20 years his junior. She also came with baggage, her son Bradley. Brad was 28 when they married, only 4 years younger than me. He had bounced between 3 colleges before eventually dropping out, and his employment history consisted of various sales positions he couldn't hold down for more than a few months. I tried to be welcoming when Dad introduced Vanessa and Brad into our lives. I really did. But something about Brad never sat right with me. The way he would study our family photos like he was memorizing them. The way he would ask just the right questions to get my father talking about the old days. About Mom, about private family matters, the way he seemed to be inserting himself into spaces that had always been just for Dad and me. Your father talks about you all the time, Brad said to me at their wedding reception, his voice smooth as silk. He's so proud of what you've accomplished at the company. Must be nice having your path all laid out for you like that. There was an edge to his words that made me uneasy. But I smiled and clinked glasses with him. For Dad's sake, 3 years. Into their marriage, Dad brought Brad into the company. He needs direction, Alex, Dad explained when I questioned the decision. Everyone deserves a chance to prove themselves. Brad started in business development, a role created specifically for him. I had to admit, he had a natural charm that clients responded to. He closed deals that had been stalling for months. Dad was delighted, and Brad's position in the company grew. 2 more years passed, and Brad was promoted to VP of Business Development. We were now equals on the organizational chart, though I had been with the company my entire professional life while he had waltzed in on my father's coattails. It was around this time that I noticed a change in Dad. He seemed distracted, forgetting details of conversations we'd had just days before. He looked tired. thinner. When I asked if he was feeling all right, he dismissed my concerns. "Just getting old, son," he'd say with a weak smile. Nothing to worry about, but there was plenty to worry about, as we'd soon discover. Dad collapsed during a board meeting in February. The diagnosis came back quickly and without mercy: pancreatic cancer, stage 4. The doctors gave him 3 to 6 months. Those final months were a blur of hospital visits, home care, and trying to keep the company running while my world collapsed around me. Dad was adamant about keeping his illness private. Only family and a few key executives knew. He didn't want clients getting nervous, stock prices dropping, or competitors circling like vultures. Throughout it all, I had to give credit where it was due. Brad was attentive to my father. He visited daily, brought him specialty foods when Dad could still eat, sat with him for hours watching old Western movies that Dad loved. I wanted to believe it was genuine affection, but a nagging voice in my head wondered if there was an angle. One evening, about a month before Dad passed, I arrived at the house to find Brad leaving his study, looking startled to see me. "Just grabbing some documents your dad wanted to review," he explained, holding up a folder. Dad was heavily medicated that day and had been sleeping most of the afternoon. I doubted he had asked for any documents. "I'll take those to him when he wakes up," I offered, extending my hand. Brad hesitated before handing them over. "Sure thing, brother. I was just trying to help." He never called me brother unless someone else was around to hear it. After he left, I checked the folder. It contained information about our company's newest security protocol, one we were developing for government contracts. High-level, confidential information that Brad had no business accessing. The next day, I installed a small camera in Dad's study. 2 days later, I hit the jackpot. The camera caught Brad using Dad's computer, accessing files and photographing documents with his phone. When I checked the computer history, I found he had accessed Dad's personal email and was forwarding messages to himself. I should have confronted him immediately. I should have told Dad. But Dad was having a rare good week. His pain was managed, he was lucid and in good spirits. I couldn't bring myself to destroy that with what I had discovered. There would be time after he recovered, I told myself, knowing deep down that recovery wasn't in the cards. So instead, I began my own covert operation. I installed tracking software on Dad's computer and monitored what Brad was accessing. I set up dummy files with slightly altered information, changes subtle enough that Brad wouldn't notice but significant enough to be useless, or even damaging if misused, and I began gathering evidence, lots of it. What I discovered was worse than I imagined. Brad wasn't just snooping. He was selling our proprietary information to MarkerSec, our biggest competitor. The same competitor who had suddenly started winning bids against us in the past year. The same competitor whose new security products were suspiciously similar to our own developmental projects. I documented everything meticulously: dates, times, which files were accessed, where they were sent, bank transfers to Brad's offshore account. I even managed to record a phone conversation between Brad and his contact at MarkerSec, discussing their next exchange. By the time Dad entered hospice care, I had a bombshell ready to drop. But again, I hesitated. Dad loved Brad, or at least, the person he thought Brad was. Would knowing the truth in his final days bring him any peace? Or would it just add another layer of pain to his already suffering body? I decided to wait, just a little longer. Dad died on a Tuesday morning in April. I was holding his hand. Brad and Vanessa had just stepped out to get coffee. His last words to me were, "Take care of each other." I promised I would, though not in the way he probably meant. After the funeral came the will reading, which brings us back to that moment. In the boardroom, with Mr. Harrington adjusting his glasses and me sitting there stunned as my father's legacy, my legacy, was handed to Brad on a silver platter. As the initial shock wore off, I looked around the room. Vanessa was dabbing at dry eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. Brad was shaking hands with board members, already playing the role of company leader. A few of the executives shot sympathetic glances my way, but most were already aligning themselves with the new power structure. Mr. Harrington approached me after the reading, his expression grave. "Alexander, I want you to know that this came as a surprise to me as well. Your father revised his will just 6 weeks ago. Prior to that, you were the primary beneficiary. 6 weeks ago, when Dad's medication was at its highest, when he was often confused and disoriented." "Did he make these changes in person?" I asked. "No," Mr. Harrington admitted. "I received the documents by courier, with his signature and those of 2 witnesses. Let me guess. Vanessa and Brad were the witnesses?" Mr. Harrington's silence was answer enough. I left the boardroom without speaking to anyone else. In the parking garage, Brad caught up with me. "Alex, wait up," he called, jogging over to my car. "Look, I know this must be a shock. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now back to where we left off." I turned to face him, keeping my expression neutral with effort. "Congratulations, Brad. You played the long game and won." He had the decency to look offended. "It wasn't like that. Your dad and I got close these past few years. He saw something in me." "Save it," I cut him off. "I'm not interested in your justifications." Brad's friendly facade slipped for just a moment, revealing the calculated look I'd caught glimpses of over the years. Then the mask was back in place. "I hope you'll stay with the company," he said. "We need your expertise, and I think working together is what Richard would have wanted." The use of my father's first name grated on me. "I'll consider it," I lied. "Great. I'm calling an all-hands meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. to address the transition. Having you there would send a strong message about company unity." I nodded noncommittally and got into my car. As I drove away, I glanced in my rearview mirror and saw Brad already on his phone, no doubt sharing the good news with someone. That night, alone in my apartment, I opened my safe and took out the flash drive containing all the evidence I had gathered against Brad. 6 months of surveillance. Irrefutable proof of corporate espionage, fraud, and likely enough for criminal charges. I poured myself 2 fingers of my father's favorite bourbon and considered my options. Option 1. I could take everything to the board immediately, expose Brad, and watch his newly inherited empire crumble before he even got comfortable in my father's chair. Option 2. I could go to the FBI. Corporate espionage involving government contracts was federal territory. Brad wouldn't just lose the company, he'd go to prison. Option 3. I could wait. Let Brad think he'd won. Let him get comfortable, start making changes, alienate longtime employees, damage client relationships, and then, when the moment was right, when it would hurt the most, I would bring everything crashing down. The bourbon burned pleasantly as I swallowed, my father's voice echoing in my head. "In business, timing is everything, Alex." The next morning, I arrived at the Taylor Technologies headquarters 15 minutes before Brad's all-hands meeting. I'd made my decision. The large conference room was already filling up with employees from every department. The atmosphere was tense. Word about the change in leadership had spread quickly. I nodded to familiar faces as I made my way to a seat in the second row. Right on time, Brad strode in, flanked by 2 board members who had always been particularly friendly with my father. He looked the part in a tailored suit that I suspected was new, probably purchased with his sudden inheritance. "Good morning, everyone," Brad began, his voice confident and commanding. "Thank you for being here during this difficult transition period. As most of you have heard, Richard Taylor, our founder and my stepfather, left controlling interest in Taylor Technologies to me in his will. This was as surprising to me as it is to many of you. Liar. But I want to assure you all that the company's mission and values remain unchanged. Taylor Technologies will continue to be the industry leader in cybersecurity that Richard built it to be. He spoke for another 20 minutes about his vision for the company, dropping buzzwords like innovation and synergy, while saying absolutely nothing of substance. The board members nodded along enthusiastically. Most of the employees looked skeptical or concerned. And finally, Brad said, "I'm pleased to announce that Alexander has agreed to stay on as Executive VP of Operations." All eyes turned to me. I hadn't agreed to any such thing, but Brad was putting me on the spot. Clever. I stood up slowly, buttoning my jacket as I approached the front of the room. Brad extended his hand with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I shook it firmly while cameras from the PR team flashed. "Thank you, Brad," I said, turning to address the room. "Taylor Technologies has been my home for 12 years, and the employees in this room are like family to me." I paused, looking around at the faces watching me. Faces of people who had worked alongside me for years. People who had trusted my father. People who deserved better than Brad's leadership. "Which is why this transition is so important to get right," I continued. "I look forward to working with Brad in the coming weeks to ensure that my father's legacy is properly honored." Brad looked relieved. The board members looked pleased. And no one but me noticed the flash drive I had slipped into Brad's suit pocket during our handshake. Not the one with the evidence, but an identical one containing nothing but a single text file with 2 words. "I know. Let the games begin. Over." The next 2 weeks, I watched Brad settle into his role as CEO with the confidence of someone who believed they'd gotten away with something. He moved into my father's office, replacing the family photos with modern art. He hired a personal assistant, a young woman named Melissa with impeccable credentials and a skirt that was always just a little too short for corporate standards. Brad's first executive decision was to cancel the development of our newest encryption software, the same project he'd been feeding information about to MarkerSec. Their version was set to launch next quarter, making our continued investment redundant, as Brad explained to the board. I said nothing in those early board meetings, just observed and took notes. The other executives seemed to be holding their breath, waiting to see if I would challenge Brad's authority. I didn't give them the satisfaction. Instead, I focused on building relationships. I took Maria Gonzalez, our chief financial officer, to lunch. Maria had been with the company for 20 years, hired personally by my father. "I don't understand it, Alex," she confided over salads at her favorite bistro. "Your father always said the company would be yours someday. He was so proud of you." "People change," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "Especially when they're vulnerable." Maria studied me, her sharp eyes missing nothing. "What are you planning to do?" "What makes you think I'm planning anything?" She smiled. "Because I've known you since you were a pimply teenager doing data entry during summer breaks. You're Richard Taylor's son in more ways than one. You don't give up that easily." I sipped my water. "I'm just taking some time to assess the situation." "Well," Maria said, leaning forward, "when you're done assessing, you should know that there are many of us who haven't forgotten who built this company. And it wasn't Bradley Wilson." Similar conversations played out with other longtime employees: Sam Parker in research and development, Janet Collins in legal, Thomas Washington in human resources. Without explicitly saying anything disloyal to the new CEO, I made it clear that I was playing the long game, and I wasn't the only one uncomfortable with the transition. Meanwhile, I had a different flash drive delivered to Brad's house each week. One contained photos of him accessing my father's computer. Another showed bank statements with suspicious deposits. A third had screenshots of emails between him and his contact at MarkerSec. Just enough to keep him looking over his shoulder, but not enough to reveal my full hand. After the third delivery, Brad called me into his office. He looked terrible, dark circles under his eyes, his normally perfectly styled hair slightly disheveled. Is everything all right, Brad? I asked innocently. You seem stressed. He closed the door behind me. Cut the crap, Alex. What do you want? I'm not sure what you mean. He pulled open his desk drawer and tossed the flash drives onto the desk between us. This. What the hell is this about? I picked up one of the drives, turning it over in my hand as if examining it for the first time. Looks like a standard flash drive to me. You know damn well what's on them, he hissed, keeping his voice low despite the closed door. I set the drive back down and leaned forward. What I know is that you manipulated my dying father into changing his will. What I know is that you've been selling company secrets to MarkerSec for over a year. What I know, Brad, is that you're a fraud who doesn't deserve to be sitting in that chair. His face went pale, then flushed with anger. You can't prove any of that. Actually, I can prove all of it. I stood up. But I'm curious. What did you tell my father to convince him to cut me out? What lies did you feed him when he was too weak and medicated to see through them? Brad's expression shifted, a flicker of something, regret maybe, crossing his features before the mask of confidence returned. Richard was concerned about your leadership style, he said smoothly. He thought you were too cautious, too traditional. He wanted someone who would take Taylor Technologies in new directions. And that person just happened to be his stepson of 6 years, rather than his own son who had dedicated his entire career to the company? I shook my head. Try again. Believe what you want. Brad shrugged, leaning back in my father's chair. The will stands. If you were planning to use these, he gestured to the flash drives, as leverage, you're wasting your time. The company is mine now, legally. I smiled. For now. As I turned to leave, Brad called after me. If you try to damage this company out of spite, you're only hurting your father's legacy. That stopped me in my tracks. Don't you dare talk about my father's legacy. You didn't build this company? You haven't earned the right to decide its future. And yet, here we are. Brad spread his arms wide. Me in the big office, you on the outside looking in. If you really care about Taylor Technologies, you'll stop whatever this is and work with me, not against me. Is that what you were doing when you sold our proprietary information to MarkerSec? Working for the good of the company? A flicker of panic crossed Brad's face. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you do. Project Firewall? The government contract bid we mysteriously lost after being frontrunners for months? The new encryption algorithm that MarkerSec is about to release that looks suspiciously like our own developmental research? Brad stood up abruptly. I think this conversation is over. For now, I agreed, walking to the door. But just so we're clear, I'm not going anywhere, Brad. And neither are the copies of everything on those drives that I have secured in multiple locations. So sleep tight. The tension between us grew over the following month. Brad began excluding me from key meetings, citing streamlined decision-making processes. I found myself assigned to oversee our most mundane existing accounts rather than new business development. If he thought sidelining me would limit my influence, he was wrong. I used the extra time to build my case and my coalition. I met with our largest clients under the guise of relationship maintenance, ensuring they knew they could always reach out to me directly if they had concerns about the company's new direction. I also finally went to see Gregory Peterson, an FBI agent who specialized in corporate espionage and white-collar crime. I didn't show him everything, not yet, but I gave him enough to pique his interest. Why come to us now? Agent Peterson asked after reviewing the preliminary evidence I'd provided. Why not when you first discovered the breach? My father was dying, I explained simply. I didn't want his final days clouded by this betrayal, and after he passed, I needed time to understand the full scope of what had happened. Peterson nodded thoughtfully. We'll need more than this to build a case, Mr. Taylor. I have more, I assured him. Much more. But I want to be clear about my objectives here. This isn't just about seeing Brad prosecuted. I want to reclaim my company. The FBI isn't in the business of helping with corporate takeovers, Peterson warned. I understand that, I said. But proving that the current CEO obtained his position through fraud and is actively damaging the company through criminal actions, that should interest both the FBI and our board of directors. Peterson agreed to open a preliminary investigation with the understanding that I would provide full access to all the evidence I had collected when the time was right. Back at Taylor Technologies, Brad was getting sloppier. The pressure of my weekly reminders combined with the stress of running a company he wasn't qualified to lead was taking its toll. He snapped at executives during meetings. He approved projects without proper risk assessment. He missed a client presentation because he was nursing a hangover. The board was starting to notice. Whispers of concern were spreading. I made sure those whispers reached the right ears. Then came Brad's biggest mistake. In an effort to generate quick profits and boost his early performance metrics, he authorized the sale of our security software to Dynacorp, a multinational conglomerate with known ties to several authoritarian regimes. Our legal team had specifically advised against this deal due to potential violations of international regulations and ethical concerns. Maria called me the minute the contracts were signed. "He overrode all of us, Alex," she said, her voice tight, with anger. Janet told him it exposed us to significant legal liability. I showed him the compliance issues. He didn't care. This was the opening I'd been waiting for. I called an emergency board meeting, citing urgent concerns about regulatory compliance. Brad tried to block it, but with support from 3 other board members, the meeting was scheduled for the following morning. I arrived early, setting up my presentation while the boardroom slowly filled. Brad walked in last, flanked by 2 board members who had been his strongest supporters. He looked surprised to see me at the head of the table. "Thank you all for making time for this meeting," I began, once everyone was seated. "I've called you here because I have serious concerns about the direction of Taylor Technologies under its current leadership." Brad rolled his eyes. "If this is about the Dynacorp deal, this is about a pattern of decisions that put this company at risk," I interrupted. "The Dynacorp deal is just the latest example." I launched into my presentation, methodically outlining the questionable decisions Brad had made in his short tenure as CEO. The canceled projects that had been near completion, the alienated clients, the talent drain as key employees began leaving for competitors, and finally, the Dynacorp deal and its potential legal ramifications. The board members listened attentively, their expressions growing more concerned with each slide. Brad attempted to interject several times with explanations or excuses, but the data spoke for itself. "These are certainly concerning developments," said Eleanor Reynolds, our most senior board member. "But they seem to be matters of judgment, rather than malfeasance. New CEOs often face a learning curve." "I understand that perspective," I replied. "And if poor judgment were the only issue, I would agree that patience and guidance might be the answer." I clicked to the next slide. A photograph appeared on the screen. Brad at my father's computer, clearly accessing files he had no business viewing. Unfortunately, there's more to the story. For the next 30 minutes, I laid out the evidence of Brad's corporate espionage, the stolen files, the communications with MarkerSec, the offshore bank account, the timeline that showed how our competitive position had eroded in direct correlation with Brad's access to confidential information. The boardroom was silent when I finished. Brad sat frozen, his face ashen. "This is absurd," he finally managed, his voice hoarse. "He's making this up because he's bitter about the will. This is a vendetta, nothing more." "Everything I've presented is documented and verifiable," I responded, calmly. "I've already provided this evidence to the FBI, who have opened an investigation." That wasn't entirely true. I hadn't given the FBI everything yet. But Brad didn't know that. "You went to the feds?" he exploded, standing up so violently his chair toppled backward. "Are you insane? Do you have any idea what that kind of investigation will do to the company's stock price? To our client relationships? I'm more concerned about what your actions have already done to the company, I replied evenly. And I notice you're not denying the allegations. Brad looked around the room, suddenly aware of how his outburst appeared to the others. He straightened his tie and lowered his voice. These are complicated matters that are being presented without context, he said. I've been working on a strategic, competitive intelligence initiative that Alex has misinterpreted. I'd be happy to explain in detail, but this isn't the appropriate forum. Eleanor Reynolds cleared her throat. I think perhaps the board should convene privately to discuss next steps. Alex, Brad, would you mind stepping out while we deliberate? We waited in separate conference rooms while the board discussed the situation. I used the time to call Agent Peterson and update him on the developments. He was displeased that I had revealed the existence of an FBI investigation to the board, but understood the strategic necessity. An hour later, Eleanor called us both back into the boardroom. The atmosphere was somber. The board has reached a decision, she announced. Effective immediately, Bradley Wilson is suspended from his duties as CEO pending a full investigation into these allegations. Alexander Taylor will serve as interim CEO during this period. Brad's face contorted with rage. You can't do this. The will gave you controlling shares, yes, Eleanor interrupted. But the board retains the right to suspend an officer of the company if there is credible evidence of misconduct. Your shares don't change that governance structure. This is a coup, Brad sputtered. I'll fight this. That is your right, Eleanor acknowledged, but I would advise you to consider your position carefully. The evidence presented today is compelling. If it is verified by an independent investigation, the consequences will extend far beyond losing your position at this company. Brad stormed out of the boardroom, nearly knocking over his former assistant in the hallway. I remained behind to answer additional questions from the board and outline my immediate plans for stabilizing the company during the transition. That evening, as I packed up my things to move into the CEO office, my father's office, Maria stopped by. Congratulations, she said, leaning against the doorframe. Or should I say, welcome back to where you belong. It's interim, I reminded her. The board still needs to confirm a permanent appointment after the investigation. Maria waved this away. A formality. Everyone knows this company should be led by Taylor. I looked down at the nameplate I'd just removed from my desk. Alexander Taylor, Executive VP of Operations. Soon it would read Chief Executive Officer. There's still a lot of work to do, I said. Brad damaged more than just our security protocols. He damaged relationships, both inside and outside the company. True, Maria agreed. But if anyone can fix it, it's you. As I gathered the last of my personal items, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. I opened it to find a photo of Brad being escorted from the building by security, followed by 3 words. This isn't over. I smiled to myself. For once, Brad and I agreed on something. This was far from over. The first week as interim CEO felt like walking through a minefield. Brad might have been physically removed from the building, but his influence lingered. Several directors who owed their positions to him watched me with suspicion. The legal team was fielding calls from Brad's attorney, threatening everything from wrongful termination lawsuits to shareholder revolts. He focused on stabilizing the company. My first executive decision was to cancel the Dynacorp deal, citing compliance concerns. My second was to reinstate the encryption software project that Brad had shelved. I reached out personally to clients who had been neglected under Brad's leadership, reassuring them that Taylor Technologies was back on solid ground. But beneath the surface, I was preparing for war. I knew Brad well enough by now to understand he wouldn't surrender his newfound wealth and power without a fight. I wasn't wrong. 3 days after his suspension, Brad called an emergency shareholder meeting, exercising his rights as majority shareholder. The meeting was scheduled for the following Monday, giving me less than a week to solidify my position. He's going to try to remove the board members who voted against him, Maria warned when I shared the news. With 51% of the shares, he has the votes to do it. Unless we can convince the other shareholders to stand with us, I replied, already formulating a plan. Our company had several significant minority shareholders, institutional investors, former executives including my father's original business partner, William Carson, and a collection of smaller individual investors. Together, they controlled 49% of the company. If I could unite them against Brad, we could at least create enough resistance to slow him down while the FBI investigation progressed. I spent the next 2 days making calls, scheduling meetings, and building my coalition. William Carson was my first stop, a semi-retired septuagenarian who still held 8% of the company and had been my father's closest friend. Your father would be turning in his grave, Carson said when I explained the situation over lunch at his country club. Richard and I built this company from nothing. The idea that some opportunistic newcomer could take it over and sell out our government clients to the highest bidder. It's unconscionable. I need your support at the shareholder meeting, I told him. Brad's going to try to remove the board members who supported my temporary appointment. You have it, Carson promised without hesitation. And I'll call Jensen, at Meridian Investments. They hold about 6% if I remember correctly. Jensen and I go way back. By Friday evening, I had secured verbal commitments representing 32% of the company's shares. Combined with my own 5%, we were still well short of Brad's controlling interest, but it was enough to make a statement. Then came an unexpected call from Vanessa, my father's widow and Brad's mother. Alex, she said when I answered, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. Can we meet? Somewhere private? I suggested a coffee shop downtown, away from the usual business haunts. She arrived wearing oversized sunglasses and a scarf that partially concealed her face, as if she feared being recognized. Thank you for meeting me, she said, sliding into the booth across from me. She removed her sunglasses, revealing reddened eyes. I've made a terrible mistake. I remained silent, waiting for her to continue. After 6 years of barely concealed animosity between us, I wasn't about to make this easy for her. When your father changed his will, she continued, I told myself it was what he wanted, that he had his reasons, that Brad deserved a chance to prove himself. She took a shaky breath. But now, seeing what Brad has done with that chance, I can't stay silent anymore. What exactly are you saying, Vanessa? She reached into her designer handbag and withdrew a small recorder. Your father never intended to leave the company to Brad. The will was changed while he was heavily medicated. Brad manipulated him. I have proof. She pressed play. My father's voice, weak and slurred from medication, filled the space between us. Brad's voice followed, smooth and encouraging. Just sign here, Richard. It's the paperwork we discussed for Alex's trust fund. My father mumbled something incoherent. That's right. $1 million in a trust for Alex, with you as the trustee until he shows more maturity in his business decisions. Remember we talked about this? How worried were you about his reckless expansion plans? Another mumble from my father. And this one is just updating your medical directive. The doctor said it's important to have this current. The recording continued for another minute, with Brad guiding my sedated father through signing what were clearly the amended will documents, not a trust fund or medical directive. When it ended, I sat in stunned silence. Even after everything I had uncovered about Brad's corporate espionage, the blatant manipulation of my dying father hit me like a physical blow. Why are you showing me this now? I finally asked. Vanessa looked down at her untouched coffee. Because I was there. I witnessed those signatures. I'm complicit. Her voice broke. I told myself Brad was just helping your father put his affairs in order. I chose to believe that because it was easier than accepting what was really happening. And now? And now I can't sleep at night. Your father loved you, Alex. He was so proud of you. He would never have cut you out like that if he'd been in his right mind. I studied her face, looking for signs of deception. Was this another manipulation? A ploy to get on my good side now that Brad's position was in jeopardy? Brad is my son, and I love him, Vanessa continued, as if reading my thoughts. But what he did was wrong. What we did was wrong. I can't undo it, but I can try to make it. Right, she pushed the recorder across the table. There's more. Conversations between Brad and someone at MarkerSec. Brad is planning how to take control of the company. It's all here. I picked up the recorder carefully, as if it might disappear if I moved too quickly. Why didn't you come forward sooner? Fear, she admitted simply. Brad has always had a darker side, even as a child. When he wants something, he becomes fixated, relentless. I was afraid of what he might do if I betrayed him. And you're not afraid now? I'm terrified, she whispered. But I'm more afraid of living with this guilt. Your father deserved better. From me. I slipped the recorder into my pocket. I'll need you to make a statement. On the record. She nodded. I know. I'm ready. And you should know that the FBI is already investigating Brad for corporate espionage. This recording will be evidence in that case as well. I understand. Vanessa reached across the table and gripped my hand with surprising strength. Just promise me one thing, Alex. Remember that despite everything, he's still my son. If there's any leniency to be found. I gently extracted my hand from hers. I'll remember. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation. I provided Vanessa's recording to Agent Peterson, who arranged for her to give a formal statement. I briefed the board on this new development and strategized with our legal team about the upcoming shareholder meeting. Monday morning arrived with a palpable tension throughout Taylor Technologies headquarters. The large conference room was set, up for the shareholder meeting, with security personnel stationed discreetly throughout the building. I had no idea what Brad might attempt, but I wasn't taking chances. Brad arrived 15 minutes before the scheduled start, flanked by 2 attorneys. He looked confident, nodding to several shareholder representatives as he took his seat at the front of the room. He pointedly ignored me. The meeting began with procedural matters. Attendance was taken, establishing that 94% of voting shares were represented either in person or by proxy. Brad's legal team had prepared a resolution to remove 4 board members, the ones who had voted for his suspension, and replace them with his own candidates. Just as the resolution was about to be presented, the conference room doors opened. Agent Peterson entered, accompanied by 2 other FBI agents and Vanessa. Brad's eyes widened as he saw his mother, then narrowed as he realized what her presence alongside federal agents meant. Mr. Wilson, Agent Peterson announced, his voice carrying throughout the now silent room. I have a warrant for your arrest on charges of wire fraud, corporate espionage, and elder abuse. Please stand and place your hands behind your back. Brad jumped to his feet, looking wildly around the room. This is absurd. These charges are fabricated by Alex out of jealousy. The evidence suggests otherwise, Peterson replied calmly, including testimony from witnesses and significant documentation. Now, please comply with the warrant. Brad's attorney placed a restraining hand on his client's arm, whispering urgently in his ear. After a tense moment, Brad allowed himself to be handcuffed and led from the room, shooting one venomous glare at me as he passed. This isn't over, Alex, he hissed. Not by a long shot. Agent Peterson paused at the door. In light of these developments, I would advise postponing any major corporate governance decisions until the investigation is complete. Mr. Wilson's assets, including his company shares, may be subject to forfeiture if he's convicted of obtaining them through fraud. After the agents departed with Brad, the room erupted in shocked murmurs. Vanessa remained standing near the door, looking lost and diminished. Despite everything, I felt a flicker of sympathy for her. I crossed the room and led her to a chair. Thank you, I said quietly. I know that wasn't easy. She nodded mutely, tears streaming down her face. The chairman of the board cleared his throat, calling the meeting back to order. In light of these extraordinary circumstances, I move that we table all resolutions until a later date and adjourn this meeting. The motion passed unanimously. The following weeks were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, FBI interviews, and corporate damage control. Brad was released on bail, but placed under house arrest with an ankle monitor. His assets were frozen pending the outcome of the case. The evidence against him was overwhelming, especially after Vanessa's testimony and the recordings she provided. Throughout it all, I worked tirelessly to stabilize Taylor Technologies. We reached out to clients who had been affected by Brad's espionage, implementing enhanced security protocols. We accelerated development of our new encryption software to regain competitive advantage over MarkerSec, whose executives were now also under federal investigation. Slowly, the company began to heal. 3 months after Brad's arrest, I received a call from his attorney. Brad wanted to meet. Against the advice of our legal team, I agreed, stipulating that the meeting take place at the federal building with Brad's attorney and Agent Peterson present. Brad looked different, thinner, paler, with a defeated slouch that had replaced his usual confident posture. He barely met my eyes as I sat across from him. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice hoarse. "I know you didn't have to." "What do you want, Brad?" He sighed heavily. "My attorney says I'm looking at 15 to 20 years. The prosecution has a solid case." I remained silent. This wasn't news to me. "He says there might be a way to reduce that. A plea deal." Brad finally looked up, meeting my gaze. "But it would require your cooperation." "In what way?" "If I plead guilty to all charges, return control of the company to you, and provide detailed information about everyone at MarkerSec involved in the espionage, the prosecution might recommend a reduced sentence, but they want your agreement, as the victim." I considered him for a long moment. The man who had manipulated my dying father, who had stolen my birthright, who had committed crimes that put national security at risk for his own profit. "Why should I help you?" Brad's facade cracked, revealing a glimpse of genuine emotion for perhaps the first time since I'd known him. "Because my mother asked you to remember I'm her son." His voice broke. "Because I don't want to spend the next 2 decades in prison. Because maybe, just maybe, I actually regret what I did." To my father? To me? Or just getting caught? He flinched. "All of it. I got carried away. The more I got, the more I wanted. It was like an addiction." I stood up. "I'll consider it." As I reached the door, Brad called after me. "For what it's worth, your father really did love you, Alex. He talked about you all the time. How proud he was. How much you reminded him of himself when he was younger." I paused, my hand on the doorknob, but didn't turn around. "I was jealous of that," Brad admitted quietly. "I never had a father who looked at me that way." I left without responding. 2 weeks later, after extensive consultation with our legal team, the FBI, and, surprising even myself, Vanessa, I agreed to the terms of Brad's plea deal. He would serve 7 years in federal prison, forfeit all claims to Taylor Technologies, and provide complete cooperation in the case against MarkerSec. The day the paperwork was finalized, I visited my father's grave. The autumn leaves were just beginning to turn, creating a canopy of gold and crimson above the peaceful cemetery. "It's done, Dad," I said, placing a small stone on top of his headstone as he had taught me when I was a child. "The company is back, where it belongs. I promise I'll take good care of it." A gentle breeze rustled the leaves overhead, and for a moment, I could almost feel my father's presence, his approval. The following Monday, I called an all-company meeting. Hundreds of employees gathered in the atrium of our headquarters, their faces expectant, curious. "As most of you know," I began, the past 6 months have been challenging for Taylor Technologies. We've weathered a storm that threatened the very foundation of this company. But today, I'm pleased to announce that Taylor Technologies is officially back under family leadership. Applause broke out, echoing through the large space. My father built this company on principles of innovation, integrity, and service. Those values got lost for a while, but they were never forgotten. Moving forward, they will once again be our guiding stars. I outlined our path forward, the renewed focus on security innovation, the expansion of our client base beyond government contracts, the commitment to ethical business practices. Taylor Technologies isn't just a company, I concluded. It's a legacy, my father's legacy, and now it's our legacy. Every person in this room who contributes their talent, their energy, and their commitment to our shared vision. More applause. Louder this time, with cheers and whistles joining in. As the meeting dispersed, Maria approached me, a small gift bag in her hand. "I found this in Richard's old desk," she said, handing me the bag. "I think he would want you to have it now." Inside was my father's watch, the vintage Rolex he had worn every day for as long as I could remember. Attached was a note in his handwriting. "For Alex, remember that time is the most valuable asset we have. Use it wisely, lead with integrity, and never forget where you came from. I'm proud of you, son." Dad. I slipped the watch onto my wrist, surprised at how right it felt there. Like a torch passed from one generation to the next, a reminder of who I was and what I stood for. The Taylor legacy would continue, and this time, nothing would threaten it again. 6 months had passed since I officially reclaimed Taylor Technologies. Winter had faded into spring, bringing with it a sense of renewal that seemed fitting for our company's fresh start. The immediate crisis had been resolved, but the road to recovery stretched out before us, filled with both challenges and opportunities. MarkerSec, our primary competitor and the beneficiary of Brad's corporate espionage, was in free fall. 3 of their top executives had been indicted, and their stock price had plummeted as government agencies suspended contracts pending a full security review. While I took no pleasure in their downfall, it created an unprecedented opportunity for Taylor Technologies to reclaim lost ground and expand into new markets. Brad was serving his sentence at a medium-security federal prison in Pennsylvania. I hadn't spoken to him since the plea deal was finalized, though Vanessa occasionally provided updates during our infrequent meetings to discuss company matters. She had retained a small portion of shares as part of the settlement, but had no involvement in day-to-day operations. I maintained my father's office largely as he had left it, with one significant addition: a framed photo of the 2 of us at my college graduation, standing proudly in front of the Stanford sign. It was a reminder of simpler times, before cancer and betrayal had changed everything. "Mr. Taylor, your 10 o'clock is here." My assistant's voice crackled through the intercom, bringing me back to the present. "Send them in, Jessica." "Thank you." The door opened to reveal a trim, serious-looking man in his early 50s. Commander James Sullivan, U.S. Naval Intelligence, was leading a task force on cybersecurity vulnerabilities in defense systems. Precisely the kind of high-profile client we needed to rebuild our reputation. "Commander Sullivan, welcome to Taylor Technologies," I greeted him, extending my hand. His handshake was firm, his assessment direct. "Mr. Taylor, I appreciate you making time on short notice." "Of course. Please have a seat." I gestured to the comfortable chairs arranged around a small conference table near the window, offering a panoramic view of the city skyline. "I'll get right to the point," Sullivan said as we settled in. "The breach at MarkerSec has the Pentagon concerned about the security of our defense networks. We need to conduct a comprehensive audit and upgrade of our systems, and we need to do it yesterday." "I understand the urgency," I replied. "You mentioned on the phone that you've already vetted several firms for this contract." Sullivan nodded. 3, including yours. But to be frank, Taylor Technologies is a question mark for us right now. Your company's recent history raises concerns. You're referring to the corporate espionage issue. That, and the general instability in your leadership. The Pentagon doesn't like uncertainty, Mr. Taylor. I leaned forward slightly. Commander, I won't pretend that Taylor Technologies hasn't faced significant challenges. But those challenges have made us stronger. We've implemented security protocols that go beyond industry standards. Every member of our team has been thoroughly vetted. Most importantly, we understand better than anyone what's at stake when security is compromised. Sullivan's expression remained neutral. Strong words, but I need more than assurances. I anticipated that. I opened a folder on the table between us. This is our proposal for the security audit. You'll notice 3 key differences from our competitors. For the next hour, I walked him through our approach, the proprietary encryption methods, the multi-layered authentication systems, the continuous monitoring protocols that would identify potential vulnerabilities before they could be exploited. Sullivan asked pointed questions, testing not just my knowledge but my commitment. Your technical solutions are impressive, he acknowledged as we concluded, but I'm still concerned about stability. What happens if you decide to sell the company? Or if another family drama erupts? I met his gaze directly. Taylor Technologies isn't just a company to me, Commander. It's my father's legacy. I fought to reclaim it because I believe in what we do and the importance of our work, especially for clients like the Department of Defense. I can provide you with any guarantees you need in writing, but the strongest assurance I can offer is this. I will personally oversee your project and ensure it meets every specification. Sullivan studied me for a long moment before nodding. I'm tentatively satisfied. My team will want to conduct site visits, interview your key personnel, and review your security clearances. We'll make everyone available. When would you like to start? Tomorrow, Sullivan replied, rising to his feet. I'll have my team here at 0800. After Sullivan departed, I summoned Maria and Sam Parker, our head of R&D, to brief them on the potential contract. This could be huge for us, Sam said, scanning the notes I'd taken during the meeting. The DoD contract would put us back on the map with government agencies. Maria was more measured. It's also a massive undertaking. Are we sure we have the resources to deliver what you've promised? We will, I assured her. I want our best people on this. Offer overtime, bring in contractors if necessary, whatever it takes. And if we win this contract? Maria asked. What then? I smiled. Then, we rebuild brick by brick, the Taylor way. The following weeks were intense, with Sullivan's team practically living in our offices, conducting rigorous assessments of our systems, personnel, and security protocols. Every vulnerability was documented, every process scrutinized. I worked alongside our teams, staying late into the night to ensure we addressed every concern. Finally, after what felt like an endless inspection, Sullivan called me personally to deliver the news. Taylor Technologies had been awarded the contract, valued at $87 million over 3 years. The victory celebration was subdued, a catered lunch for the entire company where I personally thanked everyone for their contributions. As the gathering dispersed, Thomas Washington from HR approached me. Alex, do you have a minute? I nodded, following him to a quiet corner. There's something you should know, Thomas said, lowering his voice. During the security clearance process, Sullivan's team flagged a potential issue with one of our newer hires in the software development division, a woman named Olivia Delaney. What kind of issue? On paper, her credentials are impeccable. MIT graduate, experience at 2 respected tech firms. But there are gaps in her employment history that she's been vague about explaining. I frowned. Have you spoken with her? Briefly. She seemed nervous but insisted everything was in order. I'd like to conduct a more thorough background check before proceeding further. Do it, I agreed. And in the meantime, restrict her access to sensitive projects, especially anything related to the DoD contract. That night, I couldn't shake a feeling of unease about the situation. Something about the name Olivia Delaney tickled at my memory. I pulled up her employee file on my secure home system, studying her photograph. A woman in her early 30s with auburn hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. I didn't recognize her, but something still felt off. On a hunch, I ran a search for any connection between Olivia Delaney and either Brad or Markersek. Nothing appeared in the initial results, but then I tried a more general search of social media accounts and archived web pages. There it was, a company photograph from a Markersek holiday party 3 years earlier. Most of the faces were unrecognizable in the low-quality image, but in the background, I spotted a woman who resembled Olivia, though with darker hair and different glasses, standing next to Brad. I immediately called Thomas, despite the late hour. I need a full investigation into Olivia Delaney first thing tomorrow, I told him, and I want her building access suspended tonight. Do you think she's connected to your stepbrother? I'm not sure yet, but I'm not taking any chances. Not with the DoD contract on the line. The next morning, I called Sam Parker directly, bypassing normal protocols. Sam, I need you to assess what Olivia Delaney has accessed since joining the company. Every file, every project, every line of code she's touched. Sam sounded confused, but didn't question the urgency in my voice. I'll get the team on it immediately. By noon, security had escorted Olivia to a conference room where I waited with Thomas and our chief security officer, a former FBI agent named Diana Lawson. Olivia looked nervous but composed as she took a seat across from us. Ms. Delaney, I began. Or should I say Ms. Reynolds? A flicker of recognition crossed her face before she controlled her expression. I'm not sure what you mean. My name is Olivia Delaney. I placed the enlarged, enhanced photo from the Markersek party on the table. You underwent quite a transformation. Hair color, glasses, even minor cosmetic adjustments to your appearance. But facial recognition software has become remarkably accurate. Olivia stared at the photo for a long moment before sighing. What do you want to know? Let's start with who you really are and why you're infiltrating my company. My real name is Olivia Reynolds. I did work for Markersek, but I left 6 months ago when the scandal broke. I needed a fresh start. So changing your identity and targeting Taylor Technologies was what? Coincidence? Her eyes flashed with defiance. It wasn't like that. I needed a job, and Taylor Technologies is the industry leader. The identity change was to distance myself from Markersek. Their reputation is toxic now. I knew no reputable company would hire me with that on my resume. And your connection to Bradley Wilson? Olivia tensed visibly. Brad and I dated briefly 2 years ago. It ended badly. Define badly. She looked down at her hands. I discovered he was using me to access secure Markersek files that weren't related to his authorized projects. When I confronted him, he threatened to destroy my career if I reported him. I exchanged glances with Diana, who nodded slightly. Olivia's body language suggested she was telling the truth, or at least part of it. So you're not here as Brad's plant? God, no, Olivia said with evident disgust. I despise Brad. What he did at Markersek destroyed the company and hurt a lot of innocent people. Colleagues who had no idea what was happening. People like me. Yet you lied to get hired here, I pointed out. Not a great foundation for trust. Olivia straightened in her chair. I lied about my name and former employer because I needed a job, not because I had malicious intent. I'm good at what I do, Mr. Taylor. Check my work since I've been here. It's impeccable. I've contributed valuable improvements to your encryption. Protocols. Diana slid a legal document across the table. We'll need you to sign this statement affirming everything you've just told us, along with your consent for a comprehensive background investigation. Olivia signed without hesitation. I have nothing to hide, not anymore. After she left, Diana turned to me. What do you think? I think we need to verify every word before making any decisions. In the meantime, maintain the restrictions on her access. The investigation into Olivia's background and work took 3 days. Every piece of code she had written was scrutinized for hidden backdoors or vulnerabilities. Her personal devices were examined with her consent. Her story about her relationship with Brad was corroborated by former MarkerSec colleagues. Most importantly, Sam's team discovered that her technical contributions had actually enhanced our security systems rather than compromised them. I called her back to my office once we were satisfied she posed no threat. "Ms. Reynolds," I greeted her, intentionally using her real name. She entered cautiously. "Have you decided whether to fire me?" "That depends. I have a proposition for you." Olivia raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening." "Your work has been exceptional, despite the circumstances of your hiring. We've verified your story about Brad, and I believe you when you say you want a fresh start." "Thank you," she said, visibly relieved. "However, trust is fundamental at Taylor Technologies, especially now. If you want to stay, it needs to be with complete transparency." "What does that mean exactly?" "It means working under your real name. It means disclosing your MarkerSec background to the team, and it means helping us identify and address any vulnerabilities that Brad might have created that we haven't yet discovered." Olivia considered this. "That's fair. But won't exposing my MarkerSec connection compromise your new DoD contract?" "Not if we're the ones disclosing it proactively, along with the additional security measures we've implemented as a result." In fact, Commander Sullivan was impressed with our handling of the situation when I briefed him yesterday. "You've already told him about me?" I nodded. "Full transparency, Ms. Reynolds. That's how we rebuild trust, with our clients and our team." A week later, Olivia addressed our security team, sharing insights into MarkerSec's operations that proved invaluable as we strengthened our systems. The DoD contract proceeded on schedule, and Olivia became one of our most valuable contributors. Spring gave way to summer, and Taylor Technologies steadily regained its footing in the industry. Our stock price climbed as investor confidence returned. We brought on new clients and rehired some of the talent that had left during Brad's brief tenure. One sweltering July evening, I was working late when Jessica announced an unexpected visitor. "Vanessa Wilson is here to see you, sir." I frowned, checking my calendar. We had no scheduled meeting. "Send her in." Vanessa entered hesitantly, looking thinner than when I'd last seen her 3 months earlier. "Alex, thank you for seeing me without an appointment." "Is everything all right?" She took a seat, her hands fidgeting with her purse strap. "I've been to see Brad." I waited for her to continue. "He's not doing well. The prison psychologist thinks he's slipping into depression." She looked up at me, her eyes pleading. "He asked to see you." "Me?" I couldn't hide my surprise. "Why would he want to see me?" "He didn't say exactly. Just that he has something important to tell you." Vanessa leaned forward. "I know you have every reason to refuse, after everything." "He did, but he's still my son, Alex." I sighed, leaning back in my chair. "The last person I wanted to see was Brad. We'd moved on. The company was recovering. What good could come from reopening old wounds? And yet, a small voice in my head whispered that closure might benefit us both. "I'll consider it," I finally said. 2 weeks later, I found myself sitting in a sterile visitation room at the federal prison. Brad entered in his prison uniform, looking gaunt and pale, his confident demeanor replaced by a defeated slouch. "Thank you for coming," he said as he sat across from me. "I honestly didn't think you would." "Your mother was persuasive," I replied neutrally. "She said you have something to tell me." Brad nodded, his eyes downcast. "I wanted to give you something. Something of your father's." My interest was piqued despite myself. "What do you mean?" Before he died, he gave me a letter. For you. He made me promise to deliver it after he was gone. Brad's voice grew quiet. Obviously, I didn't keep that promise. Why tell me now? He shrugged listlessly. What's the point of holding on to it anymore? Besides, the prison therapist says I need to make amends where I can. Where is this letter now? In a safe deposit box. I've arranged for my mother to access it. She'll deliver it to you. I studied him, looking for signs of deception, for the manipulative stepbrother I'd come to know. But all I saw was a broken man. Why did you keep it from me in the first place? Brad finally met my gaze. Because I was jealous. Your father wrote. You a letter? He never wrote one for me. Even dying, his thoughts were of you. The raw honesty in his voice caught me off guard. For the first time, I glimpsed the insecurity that had driven his actions. The desperate need to matter to someone the way I had mattered to my father. 2 days later, Vanessa delivered a sealed envelope to my office. The handwriting on the front was unmistakably my father's, slightly shaky from his illness but still familiar. I waited until I was alone that evening to open it, sitting in my father's chair, my chair now, with a glass of his favorite bourbon beside me. Dear Alex, the letter began, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you're facing challenges I had hoped to shield you from. The letter continued for 3 pages, filled with my father's wisdom, his pride in me, and his hopes for the future of Taylor Technologies. He acknowledged the tension with Brad and Vanessa, expressing regret that he hadn't managed to blend our families more successfully. Most surprisingly, he revealed that he had suspected Brad's dishonesty toward the end but had been too weak to address it. Trust your instincts, son, he wrote in conclusion. You know this company better than anyone. Whatever happens, remember that buildings and balance sheets don't make a legacy. People do. The lives we touch, the trust we build, the integrity we maintain when facing difficult choices. That's the true Taylor legacy, and I know you'll carry it forward. With all my love, Dad. I carefully folded the letter and slipped it into my desk drawer, next to my father's watch. Tomorrow there would be meetings to attend, decisions to make, a company to lead. But tonight, I simply sat with my father's words, feeling his presence more strongly than I had since his death. The Taylor legacy continued, stronger than ever. Not just in the company that bore our name, but in the values that guided it forward. Values that would endure long after the boardroom battles and family dramas had faded into distant memory. 1 year after reclaiming Taylor Technologies, I stood on the rooftop terrace of our headquarters, surveying the city below as evening descended. The anniversary celebration had concluded hours earlier, a modest affair where I had thanked our employees for their dedication during our rebuilding phase. Now, in the quiet solitude of dusk, I reflected on how far we had come. The Department of Defense contract had been just the beginning. Our enhanced security protocols, developed partly with Olivia Reynolds' insights, had attracted attention from various government agencies and financial institutions. Taylor Technologies was not just recovering, we were innovating again, pushing boundaries in ways my father would have approved. My phone vibrated with a text from Maria. Turn on Channel 8 News. Now. I stepped into my office and switched on the television mounted on the wall. The breaking news banner flashed across the high screen. Tech giant Vertical Systems announces acquisition of MarkerSec assets. I turned up the volume as the newscaster elaborated. In a surprising move, Vertical Systems has purchased the remaining viable assets of MarkerSec, the cybersecurity firm that collapsed following last year's corporate espionage scandal. Vertical. CEO Michael Harmon stated that the acquisition will enhance their security portfolio while distancing the technology from MarkerSec's tarnished reputation. I immediately called Maria. Are you seeing this? She asked when she answered. Just turned it on. What do we know about Vertical? They're primarily in hardware, servers, network infrastructure. Security software is a new direction for them. And Michael Harmon? Maria hesitated. That's the concerning part. He was a fraternity brothers with Jason Rankin. Jason Rankin, the former MarkerSec executive who had been Brad's primary contact and co-conspirator in the espionage operation. He was currently serving a 5-year sentence after pleading guilty to lesser charges in exchange for his testimony against other MarkerSec officials. Could be coincidence, I said, not believing it for a moment. Doubtful, Maria replied, echoing my thoughts. Vertical has never shown interest in our market segment before. And the timing is suspicious, I agreed. Let's schedule a leadership meeting for first thing tomorrow. I want everyone's eyes on this. That night, sleep eluded me as I researched Vertical Systems, founded 15 years ago by Michael Harmon and his partner Dennis Walsh. The company had grown steadily through strategic acquisitions of smaller hardware manufacturers. They had a solid reputation for quality products but no history in advanced cybersecurity. The MarkerSec acquisition made little sense on the surface. Why would a hardware company want the remnants of a disgraced security firm? Unless there was another agenda at play. The next morning, our leadership team gathered in the main conference room. I had added 2 new members since reclaiming the company, Diana Lawson, our chief security officer, and Olivia Reynolds, who now headed our counter-intrusion division. Vertical Systems' acquisition of MarkerSec assets represents a potential competitive threat, I began after everyone was settled. But more concerning is the possible personal motivation behind it. I outlined the connection between Harmon and Rankin, as well as the suspicious timing just as Taylor Technologies was regaining market dominance. This feels like more than business, Diana observed. It feels like a vendetta. Agreed, said Sam Parker. But what's the angle? The MarkerSec technology is compromised and outdated compared to our current systems. Even with Vertical's resources, they'd be playing catch-up. Olivia cleared her throat. Not necessarily. Before the scandal broke, MarkerSec was developing a quantum-resistant encryption protocol. It was highly experimental but promising. The project was shelved during the legal fallout, but the underlying research still exists. And you believe Vertical acquired MarkerSec specifically for this research? I asked. It's possible, she replied. If they could successfully develop it, they'd have a significant advantage in the next generation of security systems. Thomas Washington leaned forward. There's another factor to consider. Vertical recently hired 3 former Taylor Technologies engineers who left during Brad's tenure. I absorbed this information, the pieces beginning to form a concerning pattern. So we have a hardware company with no security background acquiring our disgraced competitor, led by a CEO with personal connections to Brad's co-conspirator, and now hiring our former employees. This isn't a coincidence. What's our response? Maria asked. First, we accelerate our own quantum security research. Sam, I want a full assessment of where we stand and what resources you need to move faster. Sam nodded, already making notes. Second, Diana and Olivia, conduct a comprehensive security audit. If Vertical is targeting us, we need to be prepared for potential intrusion attempts. Already on it, Diana confirmed. And finally, I continued, Maria, let's explore our options for a potential counter-move. If Vertical wants to enter our territory, perhaps we should consider expanding into theirs. The meeting concluded with clear directives and a renewed sense of urgency. As the team dispersed, Maria lingered behind. You realize what this means, don't you? She asked once we were alone. That Brad's influence extends beyond prison walls? Yes, I've considered that possibility. Have you spoken with him recently? I shook my head. Not since he gave me my father's letter 6 months ago. It might be worth another conversation, Maria suggested. If he's orchestrating this from behind bars, he might inadvertently reveal something useful. I considered her advice. The thought of facing Brad again was unappealing, but if he was involved in Vertical's sudden interest in our market, I needed to know. 2 days later, I found myself back in the prison visitation room. Brad seemed surprised when he was brought in, though he quickly masked it with a casual smile. "Twice in 6 months," he remarked as he sat down. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "Vertical systems," I replied, watching his reaction closely. "Michael Harmon. Ring any bells?" A flicker of something, recognition, perhaps satisfaction, crossed Brad's face before he shrugged. "Vaguely. Hardware company, right? Why do you ask?" "They just acquired MarkerSec's assets. Interesting move for a company with no background in security software." Brad leaned back, affecting nonchalance. "The business world is full of surprising acquisitions. Companies diversify all the time." "True. But when the CEO happens to be fraternity brothers with your former accomplice Jason Rankin, it raises questions." The practiced indifference slipped momentarily. "I wasn't aware of that connection." "Weren't you?" I held his gaze. "Just like you weren't aware that Vertical has been recruiting engineers who left Taylor Technologies during your brief leadership?" Brad's jaw tightened slightly. "What exactly are you accusing me of, Alex? In case you hadn't noticed, I'm in prison. My business dealings are somewhat limited these days. Prison doesn't stop communication. Phone calls, visitors, lawyers." He laughed without humor. "You think I'm masterminding some corporate takeover from my cell? You're giving me too much credit." "Maybe. Or maybe I'm finally giving you exactly the credit you deserve." I leaned forward. "Tell me about Project Quantum at MarkerSec." That caught him off guard. His eyes widened fractionally before he regained composure. "Never heard of it." "That's not what our intelligence suggests." I was bluffing, building on Olivia's information, but Brad didn't need to know that. "Your intelligence is wrong, then." He shifted in his seat, glancing at the guard near the door. "Look, I don't know what game you're playing, but I have nothing to do with Vertical Systems or whatever they're doing with MarkerSec's remains. I'm focused on serving my time and moving on with my life." Noble sentiment. Almost believable. Brad's facade cracked slightly. "What do you want from me, Alex? I'm already paying for what I did. The company is yours. You won. Isn't that enough?" "It would be, if I believed you were actually done fighting." I stood up. "But something tells me this new chapter is just beginning, and somehow you're involved." "Paranoia doesn't suit you," Brad said dismissively. "Maybe you should focus on running the company instead of chasing ghosts." As I turned to leave, Brad called after me. "How's my mother?" The question seemed genuine, catching me off guard. "She's fine. Adjusting." He nodded, a flicker of something, almost human crossing his features. "Good, that's good." Back at Taylor Technologies, I briefed the leadership team on my conversation with Brad. He's definitely hiding something. His reaction when I mentioned Project Quantum was telling. "Speaking of which," Sam interjected, "I've been digging into that. Olivia was right. MarkerSec was developing quantum-resistant encryption before their collapse. But here's the interesting part. They were building on research that originated at Taylor Technologies 5 years ago." "What?" I stared at him in disbelief. "How is that possible?" Sam pulled up documents on the conference room screen. "Your father initiated a quantum computing research division in 2019. It was highly secretive. Only a handful of people knew about it. The project was codenamed Phoenix." "And the connection to MarkerSec?" "Based on the timestamps of the stolen files we recovered, Brad accessed information about Project Phoenix during his time here. He then provided it to MarkerSec, who used it as the foundation for their own quantum security initiative." The implications were staggering. So Vertical isn't just acquiring random MarkerSec assets. They're specifically targeting technology that was originally developed here. Technology that Brad knew about. Diana spoke up. "There's more. We've detected several sophisticated probing attempts against our firewalls in the past 24 hours. Nothing has penetrated, but the attacks bear similarities to techniques MarkerSec was known for." "They're testing our defenses," Olivia observed. Typical first step before a major intrusion attempt. I processed this information, the pieces falling into place. Brad's playing a long game. He couldn't control Taylor Technologies directly, so he's orchestrating an attack through Vertical. If they could steal our current research, combined with what they already acquired from MarkerSec, they could potentially leapfrog us in quantum security development, Sam finished, gaining a significant market advantage in the process. We need to accelerate our countermeasures, I decided. Sam, I want everything we have on Project Phoenix. If my father started this research, we're going to finish it and protect it. Over the next week, we implemented enhanced security protocols while Sam's team worked around the clock on our quantum encryption development. I authorized additional resources, pulling in specialists from universities and research institutions who had worked with my father in the past. Meanwhile, Maria pursued our hardware strategy, identifying potential acquisition targets that would allow us to compete directly with Vertical on their traditional turf. It was an aggressive move, but necessary to strengthen our position. 10 days after my visit with Brad, I received an unexpected call from Agent Peterson of the FBI. Mr. Taylor, we've been monitoring communications involving Bradley Wilson as part of his ongoing case. Some recent activity may be of interest to you. What kind of activity? Phone conversations with an attorney who also represents Michael Harmon of Vertical Systems. Nothing explicitly illegal, but unusual enough to warrant attention given the history. Can you tell me what was discussed? Not specifically, but I can tell you that Project Quantum was mentioned, as was a timeline for something called Phase 2. I thanked Peterson for the information and immediately called an emergency meeting with Diana and Olivia. We need to set a trap, I told them after explaining Peterson's call. If Vertical is planning an intrusion, let's give them a target they can't resist. Diana looked skeptical. You want to create a vulnerability deliberately? That's extremely risky. Not a real vulnerability, I clarified. A honeypot. Something that appears valuable but is actually a way to track their movements and gather evidence. Olivia nodded slowly, understanding dawning. We could create a shadow server, make it appear to contain our quantum encryption research but actually fill it with trackable code. Exactly. When they access it, we'll know exactly who they are and what they're after. And then? Diana asked. Then we spring the bigger trap, I replied. But for that, we'll need help from Agent Peterson. The plan came together over the next 3 days. We created an elaborate digital facade, a seemingly vulnerable server containing tantalizing fragments of quantum encryption research, just enough to appear valuable without revealing anything truly proprietary. Every file was embedded with untraceable tracking markers that would activate when accessed. Meanwhile, Peterson arranged for FBI cybercrime specialists to monitor the operation, ready to trace any intrusion back to its source and gather evidence for potential prosecution. On the fourth night at 2:17 a.m., our security systems detected the expected intrusion attempt. Rather than blocking it, our systems allowed limited access to the honeypot server while Diana's team tracked every movement. They're in, Olivia confirmed, her eyes fixed on the monitoring screens in our secure operations center. Accessing the quantum research files now, we watched in tense silence as the intruders methodically explored the server, downloading files and probing for additional access points. After 23 minutes, they withdrew, apparently satisfied with their haul. Trace complete, Diana announced. The attack originated from servers registered to a shell company in Delaware, but the actual operations were run from an IP address associated with Vertical Systems Research Facility in Boston. We've got them, I said, relief and vindication washing over me. Peterson's team has everything they need for a warrant. The FBI moved quickly. By noon the following day, they had raided Vertical's Boston facility, seizing servers and arresting 3 individuals directly involved in the cyber intrusion. Michael Harmon was taken in for questioning, though not immediately charged. The business news channels exploded with the story, sending Vertical's stock plummeting and raising fresh concerns about corporate espionage in the tech sector. Taylor Technologies, by contrast, was portrayed as the victim that had cleverly assisted law enforcement in catching the perpetrators. 2 days after the raids, I received another call from Agent Peterson. "We've uncovered communications between Harmon and Bradley Wilson, routed through their shared attorney," he informed me. Wilson was definitely involved in orchestrating the attack, providing specific details about Taylor Technologies' systems that he had knowledge of from his time there. "Will additional charges be filed against Brad?" "Almost certainly. Directing criminal activity from prison violates the terms of his plea agreement. He'll likely face an extended sentence and transfer to a higher security facility." I felt no satisfaction at the news, just a hollow weariness. The cycle of deception and betrayal seemed endless. Later that evening, as I was preparing to leave the office, Jessica informed me that Vanessa was waiting to see me. She entered my office looking haggard, the strain of recent events evident in her face. "You've won again," she said without preamble. "Brad's being transferred to a maximum security facility in Colorado. I may never see him again." "That wasn't my intention," I replied honestly. "Brad made his own choices, again." She sank into a chair, suddenly looking older than her years. "Do you know what the saddest part is? He genuinely believed this would work, that somehow he could reclaim what he thought should have been his. The company was never his to claim, Vanessa. It was built by my father over decades. I know that now." She sighed heavily. I should have seen it sooner. The darkness in him, the obsession. Perhaps if I had... "We can't change the past," I said, surprising myself with the gentleness in my voice. "Only how we respond to it." Vanessa looked up at me, tears glistening in her eyes. "What happens now?" It was a simple question with complex implications. What did happen now? Brad was facing additional prison time. Vertical Systems was in chaos, its CEO under investigation. Taylor Technologies had successfully defended itself against the attack, and our quantum encryption research was progressing rapidly. On the surface, we had won completely, and yet the victory felt incomplete. The cycle would continue as long as the fundamental wound remained unhealed, the broken family dynamics that had set everything in motion. "Now," I said finally, "we try something different." The next morning, I called the leadership team together, one more time. "I have a proposal that may surprise you," I began. "It's time for Taylor Technologies to expand beyond security software." I outlined a bold new vision, one that honored my father's legacy while charting a course for the future. We would establish the Taylor Foundation for Ethical Technology, dedicating a significant portion of our profits to promoting responsible innovation across the industry. "This isn't just about business anymore," I explained. "It's about creating something meaningful that extends beyond profit margins and market share. Something that might begin to heal some of the damage that's been done." As the team discussed the proposal, adding their own insights and refinements, I glanced at the photo of my father on my desk. He had built Taylor Technologies as a business, but its true potential was greater than he could have imagined. The legacy he left wasn't just a $200 million company. It was the foundation for something that could truly change the world, and that was worth fighting for. 18 months after launching the Taylor Foundation for Ethical Technology, I found myself addressing a crowded auditorium at MIT. The foundation had quickly become a respected voice in the ongoing conversation about responsible innovation, partnering with universities, policy think tanks, and even former competitors to establish industry-wide standards. The greatest challenge facing technology today isn't technical, it's ethical, I told the audience of students, faculty, and industry leaders. We can build systems that are faster, more powerful, and more interconnected than ever before. But should we? And if so, what guardrails need to be in place? The lecture was part of our outreach program, designed to engage the next generation of tech innovators before they entered the corporate world. By embedding ethical considerations into their education, we hoped to foster a more responsible approach to technology development. After the presentation, a young woman approached me, notebook in hand. "Mr. Taylor, Amanda Chen from the Tech Review. Could I ask you a few questions about the Foundation's work?" I agreed, and we found a quiet corner in the reception area. "The tech industry seems to have embraced the ethical standards framework you've championed," she began. "What do you think has driven this acceptance when previous attempts at self-regulation have failed?" "I think timing played a key role," I replied. "The vertical systems scandal highlighted the real-world consequences of unethical practices in a way that resonated throughout the industry. It wasn't abstract anymore. It showed how corporate espionage and the misuse of technology could impact national security, economic stability, and individual privacy." Speaking of vertical, their former CEO Michael Harmon was sentenced last month. Do you feel justice was served? I considered my response carefully. The judicial system has done its work. 5 years in federal prison reflects the seriousness of corporate espionage charges. What matters most now is learning from these events and creating structures that prevent similar situations in the future. And what about your stepbrother? There were rumors that his sentence was extended after his involvement with Vertical was discovered. I don't comment on family matters, I said firmly. My focus is on moving forward with the work of the Foundation and Taylor Technologies. Amanda nodded, changing tack. Fair enough. Taylor Technologies' stock has nearly tripled since you introduced quantum encryption to the market. How do you balance the profit motive with the ethical principles you advocate? They're not mutually exclusive, I explained. Ethical technology can be wildly successful precisely because it builds trust. Our quantum encryption system protects user data more effectively than anything else on the market, which creates genuine value. We're profitable because we prioritize security and privacy, not despite it. After concluding the interview, I headed to the airport for my flight back to San Francisco, where Taylor Technologies had established its new headquarters the previous year. The relocation had been strategic, placing us at the heart of the tech ecosystem while providing a symbolic fresh start. As I settled into my first-class seat, my phone buzzed with a text from Thomas Washington. "Call when you can. News about Brad." My stomach tightened. After the Vertical Systems affair, Brad had indeed been transferred to a maximum security facility in Colorado and had an additional 3 years added to his sentence. I had neither seen nor spoken to him since. Once we reached cruising altitude, I connected to the in-flight Wi-Fi and called Thomas. "What's happening with Brad?" I asked without a preamble. "He's being transferred to a medical facility," Thomas replied. "Apparently he's been diagnosed with an aggressive form of leukemia. Prognosis isn't good. Maybe 6 months without treatment, potentially longer with it." I sat back, absorbing the news. Despite everything Brad had done, I couldn't summon any satisfaction at his suffering. "Has Vanessa been notified?" "Yes, she's already on her way to Colorado." "Alex?" Thomas hesitated. "She asked if you would consider supporting a compassionate release petition. With his medical condition and appropriate monitoring, there's precedent for it." "She wants my help to get him released? After everything he did?" "She's desperate." "The medical facility is better than prison, but it's still a secure institution with limited treatment options. She believes he'd have better chances with specialized care." I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose. "Let me think about it. This isn't a simple decision." After hanging up, I stared out the window at the clouds below, my mind churning. Brad had tried repeatedly to destroy everything my father had built, had manipulated a dying man, had conspired from prison even after being caught. He deserved the consequences of his actions, and yet, something my father had written in his final letter echoed in my thoughts. A legacy isn't built on retribution, but on the choices we make when facing our most difficult challenges. By the time the plane landed in San Francisco, I had made my decision. 3 days later, I sat across from Brad in the medical wing of the federal facility. The change in him was shocking. His once robust frame now gaunt, his complexion gray, dark circles shadowing his eyes. IV lines ran into his arm, delivering medications that seemed to be sapping what little strength he had left. "You came," he said, his voice raspy. "I told Mom not to bother you. She's worried about you." He attempted a smile that looked more like a grimace. "Terminal illness tends to have that effect. I've heard the doctors are recommending more aggressive treatment options." Brad shrugged weakly. "What's the point? Trading prison walls for hospital walls with the bonus of feeling like death warmed over from chemo? No thanks." "You're giving up?" The question came out more accusatory than I'd intended. "I'm being realistic. Best case scenario. The treatments buy me a couple more years of supervised release, wearing an ankle monitor and checking in with a parole officer. That's assuming the compassionate release petition even goes through, which is unlikely." I studied him, trying to reconcile this beaten man with the ruthless manipulator who had caused so much damage. "Your mother believes you deserve a fighting chance. With specialized treatment—" "Why are you here, Alex?" Brad interrupted. "To gloat? To see for yourself that karma finally caught up with me? I'm here because despite everything, you're still family. Dysfunctional, complicated family, but family nonetheless." He laughed, a hollow sound that dissolved into a coughing fit. When he recovered, he fixed me with a penetrating stare. "You know what the most ironic part of all this is? I finally understand what you were trying to protect. Not just the company, but what it represented, your father's legacy, his vision. I was so focused on taking what I thought I deserved that I never stopped to consider what it meant to actually earn something. His unexpected insight caught me off guard. It's never been about the money or the power," I acknowledged. "It's about purpose. Dad built Taylor Technologies to make a difference, to create something meaningful that would outlast him." Brad nodded, slowly. "The foundation. Mom told me what you've been doing with it. Impressive. It's a start." We sat in silence for a moment, the beeping of medical equipment marking the passage of time. "I've signed a letter supporting your compassionate release petition," I finally said. "Given my position and the victim's rights provisions in your case, it carries some weight." Brad's eyes widened in genuine surprise. "Why would you do that? After everything?" "I'm not doing it for you," I clarified. "I'm doing it for your mother, who doesn't deserve to watch her son die in prison, and I'm doing it because it's what my father would have wanted." "Your father hated me," Brad said flatly. I shook my head. "He was disappointed in your choices. But hate wasn't in his nature. His letter mentioned you, actually. He hoped that someday you'd find your own path instead of trying to take someone else's." Something shifted in Brad's expression, a softening, perhaps even a flicker of regret. "Too little, too late, I suppose. That depends on what you do with whatever time you have left." 2 weeks later, with the support of my statement, the testimony of Brad's oncologists, and Vanessa's guarantee that she would provide housing and supervision, Brad's compassionate release was granted. He would remain under house arrest at Vanessa's home, with electronic monitoring and strict reporting requirements, while undergoing treatment at a specialized cancer center nearby. I kept my distance during his transition to Vanessa's house, having done what I felt was right without feeling any need to maintain regular contact. Taylor Technologies and the Foundation consumed most of my attention, especially as we prepared to launch a new initiative focused on data privacy protections for vulnerable populations. Then, 3 months after Brad's release, Maria came into my office with an unexpected update. "You need to see this," she said, placing a tablet on my desk. On the screen was a blog post titled "Lessons in Corporate Ethics, A Cautionary Tale" by Bradley Wilson. I skimmed the first few paragraphs, which detailed Brad's early career ambitions and his growing fixation on what he perceived as shortcuts to success. He's publishing a series of articles, Maria explained. This is the third one. They're gaining significant traction in the tech community, being shared by ethics professors, corporate compliance officers, even the FBI's cybercrime division. He's capitalizing on his notoriety, I observed, unsure how to feel about it. Maybe, Maria conceded, but the content is substantive. He's breaking down exactly how corporate espionage happens, the psychological justifications people use, the warning signs organizations should watch for. It's actually valuable. I read more of the article, noticing the absence of self-pity or excuses. Brad was clinical in his analysis of his own failings, transparent about the consequences, and constructive in his recommendations for prevention. Has he reached out to you about this? Maria asked. No, this is the first I'm hearing of it. Well, people are connecting the dots to Taylor Technologies and the Foundation. Some are suggesting a collaboration would be powerful, the perpetrator and the victim united in advocacy for corporate ethics. I closed the tablet. Let's wait and see where this goes before making any decisions. Brad has a history of presenting one face while planning something else entirely. But as the weeks passed, Brad's series continued, each article more insightful than the last. He declined media interviews, directed all speaking fee offers to cancer research organizations, and maintained a modest profile that suggested genuine reflection rather than reputation rehabilitation. Through Vanessa, I learned that his treatment was proceeding with cautious optimism, the aggressive chemotherapy showing better results than expected, though the prognosis remained uncertain. 6 months after his release, I received a hand-delivered envelope from Brad. Inside was a formal proposal for a contribution to the Taylor Foundation, a comprehensive case study based on his experiences, designed as an educational tool for corporate ethics training. Attached was a note. Alex, I'm not seeking absolution or a partnership. This is simply information that might be useful in preventing others from making my mistakes. Use it, discard it, or modify it as you see fit. No acknowledgement necessary. Brad. The proposal was thorough, professionally presented, and potentially valuable to our educational initiatives. I shared it with our foundation team, who unanimously supported incorporating elements of it into our ethics curriculum. Rather than responding directly to Brad, I authorized the implementation and moved forward with our planned expansion of the Foundation's University Outreach Program. 2 months later, at the Foundation's annual gala fundraiser, I was surprised to spot Vanessa among the attendees. She looked more composed than when I'd last seen her, elegantly dressed in a simple black gown. I hope you don't mind my attending, she said when I approached her. The Foundation's work aligns with what Brad has been writing about. I wanted to see it firsthand. How is he? I asked. Better than expected. The doctors are cautiously using words like remission, though it's early days. And his writing? A small smile touched her lips. It's been therapeutic for him. A way to process everything and maybe create something useful from his mistakes. The materials he sent have been integrated into our ethics training program, I told her. They're proving quite effective. He'll be pleased to hear that. She hesitated. He asks about you sometimes, about the company and the foundation. What do you tell him? The truth, that you've built something remarkable, expanding Taylor Technologies while establishing a new standard for ethical innovation through the foundation. That your father would be incredibly proud. The mention of my father created an unexpected lump in my throat. That means a lot. The gala continued around us, executives, academics, and policymakers mingling and discussing the future of technology, governance. What had begun as a personal mission to honor my father's legacy had evolved into a movement that was reshaping industry standards. Would you consider meeting with Brad? Vanessa asked suddenly. Not for reconciliation or forgiveness, just a conversation. His perspective has changed significantly. I think you might be surprised. My instinct was to refuse. Despite supporting his release and using his materials, I had maintained a deliberate distance. But something, curiosity perhaps, or a sense, that this chapter remained unfinished, made me reconsider. Perhaps, I conceded, but not yet. There's still too much history. Vanessa nodded in understanding. When you're ready. If you're ever ready. The following month brought an unexpected development that accelerated my timeline. Project Phoenix, our quantum encryption system, was selected for implementation across federal government networks, the largest contract in Taylor Technologies' history. The announcement would coincide with a profile in the Wall Street Journal about the company's transformation from family drama to industry leader. As I reviewed the draft article, which inevitably included the history with Brad, I realized the narrative remained incomplete without addressing where things stood now. The "where are they now" element would be included whether I participated or not. That evening, I called Vanessa. Is Brad up for a conversation? 2 days later, we sat in the sunroom of Vanessa's house, neutral territory that was neither mine nor truly his. Brad looked markedly improved from our last meeting, still thin, but with better color and more energy. The medical port was still visible beneath his shirt, a reminder that his battle continued. Congratulations on the government contract, he said after we'd exchanged awkward greetings. Project Phoenix finally taking flight. You've been keeping tabs on Taylor Technologies? Just what's publicly available. Old habits. He smiled faintly. Though with considerably different motives now. I nodded, studying him for signs of the old Brad, the calculating ambition, the masked resentment. I found none, though whether that represented genuine change or simply better deception remained uncertain. Your ethics materials have been well received, I told him. We've implemented them across our educational programs. I'm glad they're useful. It's a small contribution, but it's something. Why the focus on ethics? I asked directly. Of all the topics you could have chosen to write about, Brad considered the question carefully. Because understanding the ethical failures that led to my downfall was the only way to make sense of how I ended up here. Each decision seemed justified at the time, taking what I thought I deserved, eliminating obstacles, pursuing success at any cost. It was only in prison, facing the consequences, that I recognized how fundamentally flawed my thinking had been. And the blog? The case studies? Initially just a way to process my thoughts during treatment. Then I realized others might benefit from seeing the warning signs I missed or ignored. He shifted in his seat, looking directly at me. I've done irreparable damage. To your father's memory. To you, to the company, to myself. I can't undo any of it, but I can offer insight that might prevent similar situations. His sincerity seemed genuine, though experience had taught me to be cautious. The Wall Street Journal is running a profile on Taylor Technologies next week. They'll inevitably cover our history. And you want to control the narrative? There was no accusation in his tone, just understanding. I want it to be accurate. The story doesn't end with your arrest or illness. It continues with your writing, with the Foundation's work. Brad nodded slowly. What do you need from me? Your permission to discuss your current activities. A statement, if you're willing to provide one. I can do that. He paused. For what? It's worth, Alex. I'm not the same person who tried to take your company. The ambition, the resentment, the entitlement, cancer has a way of burning those things away, leaving only the essential questions. What matters? What legacy do I want to leave? How do I use whatever time I have left? I found myself believing him, despite our history. Perhaps it was the evident physical toll of his illness, or the humble clarity in his words, or simply my own readiness to move beyond the conflict that had defined our relationship. We'll never be friends, I said honestly. Too much has happened. I know. But perhaps we can be something other than enemies. The tension that had lingered between us for years seemed to dissipate slightly, not gone entirely, but transformed into something less consuming. As I prepared to leave, Brad handed me a manila envelope. My statement for the journal. And something else you might find interesting. Notes I found while organizing my papers. They appear to be your father's early thoughts on quantum encryption, predating Project Phoenix. Technical concepts I didn't understand, but they might be valuable to your team. I accepted the envelope, surprised by the gesture. Thank you. It should have been yours all along, he said simply. Driving back to the city, I reflected on the twisted path that had brought us to this point. The company that my father had built, that Brad had tried to steal, that I had fought to reclaim, had ultimately become something greater than any of us had imagined. Not just a successful business, but the foundation for an ethical framework that was reshaping an entire industry. The Taylor legacy had survived its greatest threat and emerged stronger, more purposeful, more impactful. As I navigated through traffic, my father's watch caught the late afternoon sunlight on my wrist, a tangible reminder of his presence, his values, his vision. The continuum from past to present to future, from father to son, from challenge to opportunity. My phone rang, Sam Parker calling with updates on the government contract implementation. The future was calling, and there was work to be done. Important work that would shape technology's impact on countless lives. That, ultimately, was what I had been fighting for all along. 5 years had passed since the Wall Street Journal profile. Taylor Technologies had grown into a $5 billion enterprise, with our quantum encryption systems protecting everything from government networks to financial institutions worldwide. The Taylor Foundation had become equally influential, with ethics, certification programs that were now industry standard. I stood at the podium of the National Technology Ethics Conference, surveying the audience of executives, academics, and policymakers who had gathered for the annual event. What had begun as a personal mission had evolved into a movement. 5 years ago, we established the Taylor Ethics Certification as a voluntary standard, I told the assembled leaders. Today, I'm proud to announce that over 70% of Fortune 500 technology companies have achieved certification, with another 15% in progress. Applause rippled through the auditorium. In the front row, Maria and Sam nodded in approval. They had been with me every step of the way, helping transform both the company and the foundation into forces for positive change. This evening, we're introducing a new initiative, I continued, the Phoenix Fellowship for Ethical Innovation, providing funding and mentorship to emerging technologists committed to responsible development practices. More applause, louder this time. The name was deliberate, a nod to my father's original quantum research project that had sparked so much conflict and, ultimately, transformation. As the event concluded and guests mingled during the reception, I noticed a familiar figure entering the hall. Brad moved carefully, still thin from his ongoing treatments, but walking unassisted. The cancer had gone into remission 3 years earlier, though periodic treatments remained necessary to keep it at bay. He had become an unexpected ally in the ethics movement. His case studies now standard teaching materials in business schools nationwide. We maintained a careful professional relationship, not friends, but no longer adversaries. Impressive turnout, he commented as he approached. Congratulations. Thank you for coming, I replied. I wasn't sure you would. I wouldn't miss it. The fellowship is exactly what the industry needs. A young woman joined us, extending her hand. Mr. Taylor, I'm Dr. Emily Reeves from Stanford Center for Technology Ethics. Your foundation's work has been transformative in our curriculum development. I introduced Brad, watching her expression shift from polite interest to recognition. Mr. I. Wilson, your case studies are central to our ethics coursework. The students find them particularly compelling because they come from lived experience. Brad accepted the compliment with a modest nod. I'm grateful they've proven useful. After Dr. Reeves moved on, Brad turned back to me. Have you visited the Memorial Garden recently? The garden had been established on the grounds of Taylor Technologies' headquarters 3 years earlier, dedicated to my father's memory. At its center stood a simple stone bench inscribed with his favorite quote, "Innovation without ethics is merely invention." Last weekend, I confirmed. The cherry trees are blooming. Vanessa visits sometimes, Brad said. She says it helps her feel connected to a better version of our shared history. She's always welcome. An announcement called attendees to dinner, ending our conversation. As we parted ways, Brad handed me an envelope. My latest case study. It examines the positive transformation that can emerge from corporate crises. Taylor Technologies features prominently as a success story. Later that evening, after speeches and networking, I returned to my office at headquarters. The lights of the city sparkled beyond the windows as I opened Brad's case study. His analysis was thorough, tracing the journey from crisis to transformation, without self-pity or self-congratulation. My phone chimed with a text from Maria. Phoenix Fellowship announcements going out now. First class of fellows selected. Your father would be proud. I smiled, feeling the truth of those words. My desk held a framed photograph of my father and me at my college graduation, his arm around my shoulders, both of us smiling. Beside it sat his vintage Rolex watch, still keeping perfect time after all these years. Opening my desk drawer, I removed the letter he had written before his death. The paper had softened with time and frequent handling, the words as meaningful now as when I'd first read them. Trust your instincts, son. You know this company better than anyone. Whatever happens, remember that buildings and balance sheets don't make a legacy. People do. The lives we touch, the trust we build, the integrity we maintain when facing difficult choices. That's the true Taylor legacy, and I know you'll carry it forward. And I had. Not alone, but with a team of dedicated professionals who shared the vision. Even Brad, in his own complicated way, had contributed to that legacy through his ethics work. The path had been neither straight nor easy. The company my father left, that had nearly been stolen, that I had fought to reclaim, had become something greater than any of us had imagined. Not just a successful business, but a catalyst for industry-wide change. The following morning, I met with the inaugural class of Phoenix Fellows, 15 brilliant young innovators committed to developing technologies that would benefit humanity, while adhering to rigorous ethical standards. As I listened to their ideas and aspirations, I recognized the spark that had driven my father decades earlier when he founded Taylor Technologies in our garage. The cycle was continuing, the legacy, expanding beyond family or corporate boundaries to touch countless lives. The hidden secrets that had once seemed so important, the evidence I had gathered against Brad, the betrayals and manipulations, had given way to something more meaningful, a shared commitment to building a better future. That, I realized, was the greatest legacy of all, not what we keep hidden, but what we choose to reveal, to build, to inspire. As my father's watch ticked steadily on my wrist, I felt the continuum of past, present, and future, the essence of true legacy. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.